Welcome to Christian's Elite, a channel for wisdom talks, current affairs, news analysis, and Bible studies. Your opinions and suggestions can be left in the comment box below.
Let us start with a simple incident. Nearly 10 years ago, the English Christians, especially led by the Church of England leadership, they found that there are a lot of disunity or disharmony between the European Christian world, especially the English Christian world, and the Christian world in the African continent. They thought, well, it is not good that we will have lots of differences when we have the same faith and serve the same Lord. Why don't we have a uniformity? Okay, so the English leadership, especially led by the Church of England leadership, they decided to visit the African church leaders and have a real discussion on the matter. So they went. They had a beautiful meeting, and they began to discuss with the African Christian leaders the things that disunite the African Christianity and the Western Christianity, or the Christians in the African world and the Christians in the European world. It's not good, because we serve the same Lord and we maintain the same faith. Well, good idea. So then, what are the areas where the major differences occur? What are the areas where they could not agree with, and why they could not agree with? Okay, the first thing is their concern about what is called the moral issues. There are certain moral issues which to the African Christians are very serious, but to the European Christians, also it is serious, but they look at things from a different perspective, or I must say from a different angle. As I told you, the unlimited, uncurtailed, unchecked love of God, as I remember telling you one of the previous videos, God's love is unconditional. So we should be offering unconditional love and unconditional acceptance to every human being, no matter what that human being believes or what sort of lifestyle that person chooses or what their belief systems or manners are. We must accept everybody as long as they say that they're Christians. Why can't we be the members of the same family? It's very inappropriate that there is a disunity and disharmony in the same family. Okay, Africans agreed. We shall sit with you and let's have a serious discussion on the topics. And then came the question of homosexuality and lesbianism and the gay marriages, the same-sex marriage. So the Europeans said, as long as they are Christians, they believe in Jesus, then we don't have a problem. Well, the Europeans did not understand the fact that believe in Jesus and believe Jesus are two things. Well, the majority world believes Jesus. That does not mean that they believe in Jesus. There's a great difference between believing in Jesus and believe Jesus. That is the first misunderstanding that the European world still carries. Okay, so it is not good that man should be alone. If man should not be alone, then what about the women? Then women should not be alone either. Okay, so let them live together. Let them live together. Okay, so what shall you do? If a man wants to live with a man as his marriage partner, and a woman wants to do the same, Why can't we sanctify it? Why can't we accept it as a marital relation? Why don't? That is a good question. Okay. The funny thing is that the European world, especially the English Christian world, had to take a lot of time to explain the pros and cons of it and every little part of it and the causes and consequences of it and the future of it. And all these things they had to explain with a renewed, or I should say, a refined theology. Well done. But they thought the Africans will have to take a lot of time to give a counter argument if at all they had fun. And they must be having a really, really tough brainstorming on the topics. But much to their dismay, I think it was Bishop Desmond Tutu or some other bishop asked them a question. The question is as simple as that. If a man and man marries together, if two men gets married, one is a husband man, other is a wife man, can they produce children? Can they produce children? No. In the same way, if a woman and woman gets married, can they do it? No, no way. So, if this practice is allowed, it is permitted, then what is going to be the future of the human species on the planet Earth? What's going to be the future of the human species on the planet Earth? And they said, look at the other people, people of other faiths, to whom you say that Christianity is marvelous, excellent, so fantastic. You have so many glorious things to speak about Christianity, and that's how you went into those worlds and tried to convert those people into Christianity. Even before becoming Christians, they knew that if a man and man gets married, gets into a marital relationship, well, that is the end of that generation. Same way, if a woman and woman gets married, that is the end of that generation. If this thing is permitted the world all over, what's going to happen to the human being, human species? Okay, well, the European Christians had no answer. And then came a little belittling response, a little belittling remark from the African Christians. Do you know what did they say? They said, look, the great theology and the great philosophy and the great metaphysics and the great eschatology and all these marvelous things and theories and doctrines that you can speak about, we don't know, or we may not be able to understand, or say, being colored people, we are. In your eyes, we are intellectually far inferior, and you are still superior. That's what you maintain throughout the last many centuries. Let it be so. So take it as our inability to understand. In our inability to understand, look, we still believe that lesbian and gay marriages are detrimental to the existence and continuity of the human species. We know that. What? We know that lesbian and gay marriages cannot give continuity to human race on the planet Earth. So our brothers from Britain and Europe, do one thing. Please go and tell your church members or educated the European Christians that if you practice it, there is not going to be the next generation of human beings. Finished. I should say, rather bending their head. Or in another terminology, I say like eating a humble pie. The think tanks of Anglican church leadership had to come back to the UK. What am I trying to drive home to you? You must be asking me. Am I trying to blame the European Christians? There's no need blaming anybody. It's not the question of blame. We must understand Europe from a different perspective. What is the different perspective? What we saw as Europe and as Europeans, especially as British or English, and English in the 20th century or in the early decades of the 20th century, is not the Europe, is not the England, is not the Britain that we see today. I don't mean in the economic spheres or socio-political spheres, but I mean in the intellectual and in the moral and in the spiritual standards. Because in the beginning, in the early decades of the last century, Europe was on the pinnacles of human rights values, human values, and scientific values, and philosophical values. All these things, everywhere they went for values, 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 values. Well, I don't mean that they didn't persecute the poor people in the colonies. I don't think colonialism was a good thing, or there was anything good to boast at all about colonialism. But the thing is, they stood for something elevated, something superior, something best, and something acceptable in moral standards, in spiritual standards, in cultural standards, and in social standards, and in scientific values. But the Europe that we see by the beginning of the 21st century is entirely different. I must say 180-degree the other way around. 180-degree the other way around. So once upon a time, what their fathers looked at as elevated, as superior, as best of the very best, as appreciable, healthy, helpful, scientific, and of human value, the people of the 21st century, I don't know how much they can understand. I don't know how much they can understand. When I was living in another township called Elstree and Borehamwood for nearly 10 years, that is predominantly a Jewish population, and what you call some high standard English people. Those were the days when the British Parliament decided to pass a law in favor of the same-sex marriage. Because I was very strongly and actively involved with so many of the socio-political and cultural and religious also issues in this country in those days, I decided to write a strong letter to our local MP so as to convince him that this is something that Britain should not do. I wrote a letter. For nearly a fortnight, I didn't get a reply. I thought, well, he would have ignored my letter. But a fortnight later, I got a much lengthier letter than the longer letter than the letter that I wrote to him. And in that letter, he told me, Babu, I have carefully read every little word that you have jotted in your letter. Yes, marriage. I'm a great believer. I'm a great believer in the system of marriage. And it is not good that man should be alone. Let people live together, be it man and woman, or man and man, or woman and woman. Let them live together. Let them live as a family. I'm a strong supporter of family. So I am going to support this motion in the parliament. I thought, my goodness God, who did I write to? Who did I write to? Then immediately, a very disappointing thought came to me. Because in England, everybody has a pet dog. Almost all families have a pet dog. And these pet dogs are very, very intelligent creatures. The way in which they respond to human needs is absolutely amazing. However, if the dog owner tells the dog, look, my Mr. Tom or Johnny or Matthew or Thomas, these are all the names, Susie, these are the famous names of the dogs in this country. If a dog owner tells, look, Susie, the price of your dog food is increasing. The dog biscuits are becoming very costly. So you be careful. If that landlord, that dog owner, tries to tell or tells the dog that its food price is increasing, the dog will still look at the owner. It might still nod its head as if it understands everything. But I don't think any dog will ever understand it. Any dog will ever understand it. I thought, what did I do? I was writing to a man who does not understand the very meaning of the word family or the very purpose of the word family. And that too in England, which predominantly was the epicenter of Christian revival the world all over in the last century. What is the purpose of marriage? That's what we see in the book of Malachi, or is a Malachi. Malachi is the Greek version, Malachi. In the book of Malachi, chapter 2, verses 14, 15, 16, when we read it carefully, but unfortunately, this is clear in the King James version of the Bible, not necessarily in other translations, and also very clear in the Hebrew original. It says, is it not to bring forth a God-fearing offspring that God has brought you together? So God brings a man and woman together. What is God's great purpose? God's great purpose is that together they can bring God-fearing offspring, God-fearing children into this world. So they can bring up God-fearing children, and they can offer the society, contribute society with a handful of children who have scientific thinking, moral and intellectual and spiritual values, people of high level thinking, people of, I should say, appreciable characteristics. So that is the purpose of marriage. Yes, this my local MP, whose name I would rather not mention in this context, did not know it. Did not know it. I don't think he must be in his late 30s in those days. If he could not learn that by that time, well, I don't think he will ever learn it. He will ever learn it by the rest of his life. Because there's a saying in English, if you don't become healthy by 20, wealthy by 30, and wise by 40, you will not become healthy, wealthy, or wise for the rest of your life. Okay, I regretted writing to him. There was a time when the world looked at a few things as elevated. That's on one extreme end. And the other extreme end are those things that are base, that are very low quality, absolutely cultureless. One is cultured, other is cultureless. So the 19th century English literary critic and a great writer of the time, whose name was Matthew Arnold. Um, I used to take a lot of reference from his writings. He gave a word. I don't think it's his word, but he popularized it. The word is Shaltonism. Shaltonism means to elevate, sorry, to delete the distinction between the good and the bad, the best and the very best, the elevated and the commonplace. It's a serious crime. There is a distinction between, there is a difference between, or there's a world of difference between those things that are good and those things that are bad. If you delete this distinction, If we eradicate this distinction between the good and the bad, then what happens is a cultural chaos. Then what happens is a cultural chaos. So what can you call it? A judicious juxtaposing of the elevated and the commonplace. A judicious juxtaposing of the elevated and the commonplace. If you ask me, what is the cultural situation of especially the UK in which I live, I can very clearly tell you this is the UK. This is the UK. What happens in every sphere of life, in every walk of life, what you see is a very clear and clearly a very clear attempt to eradicate this distinction between the good and the bad. So people can't distinguish between what is good and what is bad. Then what do you see? A ludicrous juxtaposing, a ludicrous juxtaposing of the elevated and the commonplace. And that leads every society that invariably leads into what is called cultural chaos. Cultural chaos. So the world that practices this judicious juxtaposing between the elevated and the commonplace will be certainly, I should say, on a declining stage, declining to what is called paganism and barbarian ways of life. Paganism and barbarian ways of life. So this world that unknowingly is barbarous, and this world that is fallen back into paganism, though it doesn't realize it, and that world has no moral right. That's what I say. They have lost their moral right to condemn religious atrocities or the sort of things that happen elsewhere in the world, be it Mannipur or wherever it may be. The best example is you condemn, when I say you, I mean Europe, condemns the religious persecution against Christians in Manipur or elsewhere. Okay, but you don't say physically or materially or politically who are the perpetrators of this evil. Because without some human beings to perpetuate it, evil cannot be perpetuated. Without an agent to perpetuate evil, evil cannot be perpetuated. What is the source of evil? The source of evil is the God of darkness, the Lord of darkness or the God of darkness who rules this world is the source of evil. But the question is, he doesn't appear in person. He doesn't appear in person to perpetuate evil anywhere in the world. On the contrary, he selects or picks up some people. He picks up some people and he uses their established beliefs and cultures, which unfortunately is not culture. Quite a few things, or so many things that the world now hails as culture is actually cultureless. So that's a culture. This is a culture. It's yet another culture, yet another culture. Well, unfortunately, most of these things which are hailed as culture are not culture. They are absolutely cultureless. They are absolutely cultureless. So the master brain of evil is not any human being. The master brain of evil is the God of darkness. But the God of darkness uses always those human beings who practice certain things in their life, which though to them is culture, however much it is cultureless and which they don't understand. So these human beings are being used or picked up and used. These are the perpetrators of evil. As long as the perpetrators of evil are not stopped, are not prevented, from advancing, there is no human, political, social solution for it. Look at Europe. Europe, on the one hand, embraces the perpetrators of evil, and then on the other hand, they express their concern. For evil being perpetrated. This double standard policy, this is double standardness. Well, this is a paradoxical situation. As long as the world doesn't understand it, as long as Europe doesn't understand it, I should say, Europe doesn't understand it, or as long as the Western world doesn't understand it, doesn't understand what? That with one hand, they hug the perpetrators of evil, and with the other hand, they pretend to resist evil. With one hand, they hug, and with the other hand, they pretend to resist or to stop evil. This is a paradoxical situation. I should say, number one, the educated and intelligent and intellectual world at large should be able to understand it. And secondly, they should be able to make a clear distinction between what is helpful and healthy to the proper existence and continuity of mankind on the planet Earth, and what are the things that are detrimental to the existence of human civilizations or scientific thinking or the proper continuity of mankind. As long as we are not able to understand this fact and make the clear distinction, well, I should say the world will be in disarray. This is what I got to say in connection with the European Parliament's, I should say, their grievances on the Mannipur situation, as it was motioned in the European Parliament on the 14th of July. Thank you. God bless you. Bye.